What is standing in the way of our kids pursuing careers in mining? Decades ago, parents would tell their children that they should pursue their dreams. What's the issue with this advice?
Maybe 100 years ago, 1923, no parent would have told their child to follow their passions. Like, it just wasn't a sentence. As we became a more affluent society, we started to talk to children and sort of teach them that they can do anything, that they can follow their passions and follow their dreams. And in one sense, I really love the aspirational message in that. I think it's beautiful. But in another sense, have we set children up for perhaps some disappointment? Because if their passion is to play in the NHL or their passion is to be Beyonce, almost no children are going to play in the NHL or be Beyonce. And it maybe has left them with this sense of disappointment because the reality is you can't be anything you want. You can't be anything you can dream of. But you can still follow your passions and you can bring your passions with you. And I think that's maybe the sense we need to think about as we talk to children and young adults about career.
When I was in my 20s, there really weren't many women who were reporting on technology. That has changed over the years, but it was hard to find those sources of inspiration. Knowing that there aren't yet many young women in mining, where do you turn for inspiration?
It's a good one. It's definitely an industry that could use a lot more women and diversity in general, but we're working on it so hard, and it's been really improving. Um, Honestly, I think one of the best moments for me is you don't just have to look up; you can also look around. I The other day I was on site, and my team was 5 out of 7 for my like direct reports that were female, and I thought that's a great moment. You know what I mean? And it doesn't have to necessarily, there are great mentors, and I do have these amazing female mentors who have really been paving the way, but also taking a look at what I can do and the team that I can surround myself with. And I think that those are the moments that really make the difference because those keep me going. They motivate me for the next round of engineers to have that experience and have people to look up to. And I think it's really changing, and the industry is getting so much better, and so many more prominent women are just being as successful as we can imagine.
What do you think it's going to take to get this next generation to consider some of these skilled trades to pursue these opportunities that are right here on their doorstep?
Well, I think one is compensation, but I think the conversation needs to be bigger than just about money, because if it's only about money, I actually don't think that's a fantastic motivation if that's your only motivation as a young person. But it is one piece of it. I think another piece of it, when we talk about mining in the 21st century in Canada, Ontario, this is really an environmental job. We are mining minerals and metals, things that we are going to need as we transition to a net zero carbon economy. So if we teach kids that, well, a job in mining is really about saving the environment, saving the planet. You can be a part of the whole mechanism, because in order to move to a net zero carbon future, we're going to need these essential minerals and metals that we have here in Ontario. So I think that is maybe the way to frame it. It's not just a good paying job in mining, but you're actually help solving a problem for the planet.
I think a lot of people can understand what life is like in downtown Toronto working on Bay Street. What do your days look like in the Northwest Territories from the moment you wake up throughout the day when you are working?
Yeah, I've always joked, like on TikTok, you see like my 5 to 9 after my 9 to 5. And I think the TikToks are very different than my life. I would have the like my 6 to 6. And it's a bit different. Like you get up, but you go to breakfast with your friends, and then you go to work. And I say friends in a real way because you're living with your coworkers. Like you're in a camp. It's kind of like a hotel, and your offices are connected. And so you're spending a lot of time with them. You're playing badminton. You're in the gym. You're working out. You're having great like conversations with them at lunch. You get to really know them, and that you spend half your life with these people. So it's nice to have those people that it's like a whole family up there, and then you get to work all day. So we go out in the field, and we have meetings just like anybody else, and we do emails just like anybody else. But it's a lot of fun throughout the day, and then you get into a routine of the 12 hours you get from day shift to night shift, and then you fly home.
One thing I think we've also seen with this next generation is that they do want to pursue careers that are purpose driven. So when we talk about helping in terms of climate solutions, there are plenty of opportunities there. So what do you think we need to do to sort of practically shift the focus and allow these young people to recognize these opportunities?
Maybe the question we should be asking kids is not what do you want to do or what is your passion, but it should be followed with what is your passion and how are you going to use that to help the world? That's the conversation we need to be having with our kids. And if their passion is music, you're going to be a music teacher or maybe some other occupation music. If your passion is sports, it might be coaching or teaching. If your passion is saving the planet and in an environmental passion, but then the question is, well, how can you be part of that environmental move going forward? I think jobs in mining, this is where it all starts. Without the lithium, the cobalt, and the nickel, Canada, we have all of these. They're right here in Northern Ontario. We need those to move ahead on a plan forward for the environment.
What advice do you have for Gen Z in terms of encouraging them to see themselves pursuing a career in mining?
I think for me, the biggest thing that drives me to be involved in mining is to be a part of the improvement and to say that mining is an industry that wants to hold to the highest standards. And when you think about your day-to-day, we think a lot about fast fashion. We want sustainable brands and we want to get rid of fast fashion because we want to understand supply chain and how it got there and the things that we're using are done in the best possible way, holding the standard. And encourage Gen Z to get involved and be a part of that conversation about the supply chain. And the best way to do that is to get into mining, to understand it, to push the standards and be a part of it because it's so critical to our future. So let's make sure it's done right. But there's so much more we can do, and it's a great career and opportunity to be a part of improving that.
Let's talk about that youth demographic. What do you think are some of the negative perceptions that are entrenched among this next generation, and what are they getting wrong?
Yeah, youth perceptions of mining are unfortunately dated. They're incorrect. They're often based on stories or movies or TV or social media that portrays mining as, this dark, dirty, dangerous, or environmentally destructive type of industry. And these perceptions could not be further from the truth. In reality, Canadian mining today is a global leader in the areas of responsible, sustainable development and health and safety. The industry offers hundreds of different occupations, and we're implementing some of the most advanced technologies in the world around robotics, automation, artificial intelligence, data science, drone and remote monitoring. All of these technologies are on mine sites and mineral exploration sites today. And these technologies are making mining safer, more accessible, more productive. It also means that we are having, the need for higher skilled individuals. It's not the same mining industry that it was 20 years ago.
You are working for a gold company. So can you talk about your experience during this time where there is more attention that's being paid to, again, responsibly sourced minerals and metals, but why you chose to work in gold?
That's such a big one that comes up so often. We always hear that, well, there's gold in your phone that you're tweeting from, right? And to me, it's tired. And there's a much simpler response to that, I think, in that especially young people today, we're seeing the effects of a struggling economy without getting too subjective, right? We're up against that. And so it's time to start seeing the economy as a bit of a social receptor. If the goal is to provide sustainability for this generation and for everyone, for the people in Canada. I'm no economist, but I can't imagine that anyone who saw the consequences of dismantling the mining industry would follow that route if they saw that modeled out, right? It feeds so many thousands of families and it's the backbone of our economy. And so to see the effects of that process struggling and what it does to, the civic realm, there's just no taking it away.
One of the themes that we've been exploring on this season of the podcast is the role of parents and family members and how they influence youth career choices. What's your interpretation of this? What is the role of parents like me, like you?
Yeah, parents, teachers, guidance counselors, family members are extremely important in youth making their career decisions, and often these individuals are perpetuating some of the negative stereotypes associated with mining. They still view mining as it was a generation or two ago. So it's a challenge, and I know most teachers, especially those in larger urban centers, are just not aware of the resource sector, and are not covering this sector in their careers class or their civics classes. And I get it. I grew up in Northern Ontario, and when I was in high school, the message from our teachers and guidance counselors was, if you did not succeed academically, if you didn't get good grades, you were going to work in the mines. And it was one of those things that mining was your safety net, or mining was your last resort. Nobody in my high school was encouraged to pursue geoscience education or mining engineering or metallurgy or mineral processing. And clearly, this has to change.
I read that you challenged your peers and professors while you were at Queen's. Can you talk a little bit about what you experienced while you were at Queen's and how you helped to change the narrative?
To go chronologically, I started my education and we really wasted no time learning about, the abomination that is development and capitalism. And, we all listened to Joni Mitchell and had a great time being angry. But, halfway through my degree, I decided, okay, I'm going to go out and get some work experience. I'm going to go do an internship. And I ended up taking a role as an intern in the mining industry in gold. And I think what was really eye-opening was how much low-hanging fruit there is to actually make change and be involved in the actual impact that we're hoping to see. And so I came back to school with a very different perspective, knowing that people that I was rejoining didn't have the same understanding of the flip side of the coin that I did. And so I came back and I spoke on some panels about, at environmental conferences, and a moderator would say to me, you're going to get a lot of questions, right, if you're coming into this, speaking as an environmentalist, and them saying, well, you're going to raw the mining industry, how does this all shake out? And I was really confident in my stance that you're way more effective being involved than on the outside, and I think that that's not hard for people to resonate with once you kind of walk them through that. So I kind of took on a lot of questions from my peers, and there's also the aspect of just the education itself, right? Environmental activism was a required course in my undergraduate degree. And so coming into that and having to process a lot of points that I didn't necessarily agree with and couldn't get behind the kind of notion that all of these smart young people who are really passionate about protecting the environment and sustainable development were going to try and take an approach that I just didn't think would work, or that was necessarily the best way for them to apply themselves. And I absolutely caught flack for that a lot of the times. And I would write a paper in a tone that wasn't really the way it was intended to be done. And I had to that was my cross to bear throughout school. And I think as people are becoming more educated about sustainability and understanding, now we have this green tech revolution where we need mining. There's more willingness to understand where to apply yourself. But certainly when I was first coming back to it, I didn't have any role model of someone who was a true environmentalist at the core and really had a passion for sustainability, who was also applying themselves in industry.
What is at risk if we don't properly address these negative perceptions?
Yeah, mining is just so important to our way of life. We need mining and metals for everything. And it's just such a huge engine of the Canadian economy. Mining contributes over $100 billion to GDP. It employs over 400,000 people. It's the largest employer of Indigenous people in Canada. The demand for minerals and metals is only expected to grow. And Canada is well positioned to benefit from that. We are strong producers of and have projects in the pipeline for things like zinc and copper and cobalt, nickel, lithium, among others. But the challenge is we're not going to be able to extract any of those raw materials without people.
I've been told that you are a Jill of all trades. What exactly does that mean, and what has been your path to get here?
So a Jill of all trades is kind of, I guess, a doctor for machines, because that's what a millwright is. They're a little bit of everything. They see a little bit of every trade. And it was my welding teacher actually that told me I should be a welder and join the trades at least. And I didn't really believe him at the time. I kind of thought he was pulling my leg, and I'm like, who's going to hire a little girl to do a man's job? I don't belong in this world. It's like setting me up for failure. But he really encouraged me to try it out, and here I am now.
One of the things that we're trying to do on this podcast series is talk about opportunities in the trades. What are some of the misconceptions that people have about pursuing a path like yours?
Oh, there's a ton. I think the one that stands out the most and the one that I hear the most is that women aren't strong enough. And I don't think people understand how much mechanical advantage there is to just about anything you do these days. We've always had chain falls and we've always had come alongs, but we have so much technology at our fingertips now that if a company is willing to put the money into it, it's more than acceptable to be able to have a woman that's maybe not as strong, or even a like not as strong male in the same role. It's not what it used to be. It's not constant physically demanding labor. It can be some days, but even if you keep at it long enough, you're going to develop those muscles over time.
What would you say to young people right now who are facing a tough decision about what types of career they can pursue? What's your advice for them?
I think sometimes you have to understand you're not quite ready yet to make that choice as soon as you'd like to be. And there's a lot of pressure to make that choice as soon as possible as well. But once you start to find something that you love, you'll find that these opportunities fall one after the other. And that's what trades was like for me. Whether I wanted it or not, they seemed to keep falling flat at my feet, these opportunities one after the other. And I kept advancing myself in my career, and I kept feeling passionate. But I genuinely love and enjoy doing these things, especially when I have the extra time in my life to do them, because my job feels like, even though on the hard days it's not easy, it feels easy to continue to do.
One of the themes that we have discussed throughout this podcast series is the importance of minerals and metals in our green energy future, particularly metals found in the Ring of Fire deposits in the James Bay and Hudson Bay lowlands of Northern Ontario. Why is it important for you to work for a mining company with a sustainable plan?
For me, it's important that I work for a company that targets zero emissions, and because over the years we have developed major you know major impacts to the environment with climate change and whatnot. So for me to be able to work for a company that targets zero net emissions and is planning to go for you know the least amount of impact to the environment is I think is great. I think it'll not only benefit you know people on the ground, but but the region as well. It'll minimize the impacts to the land. It'll minimize the impact you know um, to the climate. So for me, it is very important knowing that this project uh, is targeting a zero net emissions and moving away from use of fossil fuels.
What does reconciliation look like to you?
What it means is meaningful Indigenous inclusion in Canada's economy to reach socioeconomic parity with the rest of Canada. So what I'm saying there is that where we have the education, employment, and income levels of Indigenous people at least equal to that of Canadians. So that's what reconciliation looks like to me, where there's a common understanding of Canada's true history, but also work together in a shared pathway to making this socioeconomic parity happen, because most Indigenous people were excluded from Canada's economy for many years. So this is why we think it's so important going forward that we focus on economic reconciliation. We know that governments can't get us there where we need to go. They can help, they can facilitate, but we think that corporate Canada academia, healthcare organizations, justice organizations in our own community, as well as mainstream Canadians, can all play a role in bringing about reconciliation.
Beyond employment training and procurement, Indigenous communities are owners and weaving Indigenous knowledge throughout the mining process. What do you see as the opportunities in front of the Indigenous communities?
I think the opportunity available for Indigenous communities and people in the Ring of Fire region is vast and great. You know, for me personally, I would like to see many of our younger generations, our youth that are going through grade school and high school now, for when they get to my age, to be able to work in the mine, to be able to gain skills and knowledge, um, to put into the careers, and to be able to make a living for themselves. You know, I think everyone would like a job, and everyone needs a job in order to to build a life they want, and we can't do that without jobs available. So having a project such as this, I think it is on a scale, it is on a very large scale project where we can provide jobs to those people in need. We can provide jobs to the local Indigenous communities so that their population can be able to work, can be able to gain knowledge, skills, and create everlasting friendships and connections.
As the largest private sector employer of Indigenous peoples in the country, how is the mining industry playing an active role in reconciliation?
Well, many resource development companies recognize the importance of economic reconciliation and proper engagement with Indigenous communities because they understand that it provides better project certainty, invites solutions to sustainability and climate change mitigation. And we now know that investors, shareholders, and regulators are increasing their focus on environment, social, and governance, as well as Indigenous criteria. So we know that investment will flow where there's support for Indigenous participation. And this eventually reflects positively on the revenues if done right.
I know that Indigenous youth and their families who are listening to this podcast, they're going to hear you, hear your voice, your perspective, your career journey. What are some final words that you have for them as they look to build their own futures?
It is not, you don't have to follow the norm of as soon as you graduate at 18, you have to go directly into university or directly into college. Not everybody, you know, can do that. And we know the limitations of why. So it is important, if you as a young Indigenous person, or you as, an Indigenous person in their 30s, 40s, having kids, having a family, if you would like to become educated, and I encourage you to do so. There is so many great opportunities available for people once you earn a diploma, earn a degree. Education is the key to success, and I encourage everybody to go for a higher level education, to go for training. If you want to become a welder, go for it. If you want to take a heavy equipment operator course, go for it. There's many opportunities. If you would like to work in a mine, you don't necessarily have to take geology at a university or take a mining technician program college. There's many streams that you can get into to work in a mine. For myself, an example, I took Indigenous learning, and yet here I am working in a mineral exploration camp as their health and safety environment coordinator.
When you talk about the importance of economic development in terms of addressing some of the challenges facing Indigenous peoples, how do traditional Anishinaabe values fit into this outlook?
Well, full community engagement is critical. I think that it's important as we go forward, and I've seen really positive examples of this where communities engage their full community on multiple sessions so that they're fully, again, informed of some of the possibilities to make an informed decision. And that's the most important thing. Our people have done that as part of our values. We incorporate our teachings into this learning. I think it's really important that we do that. And but that importance of meaningful engagement, including the youth directly, that in this engagement, and making sure that we do this often. And one session isn't good enough. You have to have several sessions, bring in all kinds of people with the expertise and knowledge to help you make a good decision. I think that that's the best way to go forward with our traditional values. And we know that protection of the land, stewards of the land, is absolutely critical. But we also know that we can still protect the land and set aside places that the whole world needs, that the globe needs. We need to protect areas, and that's also important. But where we can develop some of the resources in a sustainable way and have a say in how those resources are developed, I think that's the area that we want to reach, where we make those informed decisions.
We're waiting to go underground, so tell me what's happening and what we're about to do.
All right, so this shaft has 4 compartments. There's the main compartment that our personnel travel up and down to start and end of their shift, as well as moving materials. We have 2 other compartments that are used, they're called skips, and that's how we transfer the ore from underground up to surface, and it's loaded into bins, and from there it's transferred into highway trucks to be shipped off site, as well as another compartment called an auxiliary cage. So that's used to move personnel up and down throughout the shift.
So how long will it take us to get where we're going?
It'll be about a 4-minute ride.
So a longish elevator ride.
Yes. Yeah, we're going to be going to 1,480 meters, so almost 1.5 kilometers underground.
Let's say you go to a dinner party with a bunch of people who you don't really know that well. You tell them that you are a low carbon specialist and you work in the mining industry. What is their reaction, and how do you demystify what you do?
Yeah, that's a good question. So typically someone asks what a low carbon specialist is at all. And it's often tied in with climate change, sustainability in the broader sense. And so what I like to say to folks is what we're seeing now in the public space around a drive from a consumer perspective to see more sustainable products and to live in a more sustainable way. As part of the value chain, as a mining organization, we have a responsibility to contribute to that sustainability in the value chain. And so for Vale, for a nickel copper mining company, what does that mean? Well, it means we need to supply raw materials, and to do that in a sustainable way, we need to reduce our emissions in the processes we operate, and also influence our suppliers upstream and downstream so that they're contributing to the collective reduction. And then ultimately that can get passed down the supply chain through to what is driven by typically, the end customer. And so frequently in today's world, it's the automotive EV industry, is a very popular subject, and that's a good example for us. We produce Class 1 nickel, which is, a significant volume of that is sold into the EV market, and of course, intrinsic to on-road EVs, folks want their products to be sustainably sourced.
I did have a chance to do a tour, walk around, experience virtual reality, augmented reality. And again, this isn't really the perception that people have when they think about what's happening in mining and training, but it really is a high-tech place.
Well, one of our aspirational priorities is to be this global leader in all that is skilled labor, training and development in the mining industry. And quite proudly, given the materiality of how many people we train in a given year, somewhere north of 25,000, we feel as though that we're poised to, claim that we've achieved that aspirational priority. But part of that requires us to invest in, new ways of learning, new ways of understanding how, your job will evolve. And so we believe in that blended learning educational model, where imagine the life of a student coming in, taking some theoretical training courses in a classroom, perhaps a little bit of online e-learning for certain components of education. But then the real unique opportunity is that we can put those would-be, mine workers, those students, those trainees, in a mobile equipment simulator for a few days. Learn how to operate an LHD, learn how to operate a bolter. Then from there, we can put them in the virtual reality experience and get a tactile experiential learning opportunity to do a pre-operational circle check on that vehicle. And then the final piece, we can take them to the NORCAT Underground Center, an operating mine where they then can, after building up a bit of core confidence and competence using these simulation tools, can then operate that piece of equipment in an operating environment. Not a tunnel, not a parking lot, actually in an operating mine. So if you think of that blended learning model, the trainees are having an unbelievable learning experience to get the competency and confidence, but equally as important, they get inspired because they get to see and get a perspective on this is what a career in mining looks like. So the educational credentials are the most important, but close on its heels, these graduates become ambassadors to promote that, no, mining actually looks very different than these preconceived notions, and we're seeing that starting to happen now. So the advent of new technology for training and development not only educates, but it's inspiring, and it's also a mechanism to motivate those graduates to promote to others that, look, I get to operate a battery electric vehicle, or I can operate something via teleremote autonomous systems, and I learned how to do it at NORCAT. So it's a really interesting convergence of the new technology, building these brand ambassadors to promote mining, as well as getting the core credentials to be safe and productive on the job.